When disaster strikes, will you be ready?
Good evening, and we begin tonight with the monster hurricane and its deadly impact already.
When all hope is gone, will the government be there for you? If you're looking for ways to take your prepping to the next level, then you've come to the right place. Broadcasting from a secure and well-prepared location, it's time for Prepping 2.0. And now, please welcome authors Glenn Tate and Shelby Gallagher.
Well, welcome everybody to Prepping 2.0, episode 61. We have a great guest, prepping author Mark Goodwin. He's going to talk about a variety of things, including some predictions for 2020 and his take on how we got to the situation we're in, which I think you'll find fascinating. As you can tell, there is no Shelby voice, and the reason for that is it is Christmas season. Yes, Christmas, not holidays, Christmas season. And she is entertaining a bunch of family from out of town, and it just worked out better this way. So it'll be just me today. And as I say, we'll be having prepper author Mark Goodwin on. As you guys know, we have the top 100 things that go the fastest in a collapse. That's a list prepared by, among others, survivors of the Bosnian Civil War. And it's fascinating. You look at these 100 things and you think, gee, I never thought that would be important, but now I kind of see why it is. So highly recommend that list. It is on our website, prepping2-0.com, prepping2-0.com, which is where you can find, the audio files of all the regular shows. You can find all kinds of information, our friends and affiliates page, and all that kind of cool stuff. So it's all there on the website. Item number 51 we're at, and that is fishing supplies and tools. And I added an experience fishing. Obviously, fishing is a great way to harvest some protein, which could come in pretty doggone handy given what's coming. And it's one of these things, and I can attest to this from personal experience, it's one of these things that you got to actually do and try and perfect, and your gear and your skill is very location specific. What works in Pennsylvania is probably not going to work well out on the ocean, kind of by where I live. So you need to get some gear, and you need to, I think, go to like local sporting goods stores and ask them what to use and get some knowledge. If you can, partner up with somebody who's a fisher person. Just kidding. That's a totally lame word. We're not going to use it. A fisherman, male or female. Shelby, by the way, is an outstanding fisherman because she's really good at this. I have, like so many other skills I had when I was a kid, and it kind of sloughed off and went away the past few decades. She's reteaching me how to do freshwater. And as I say, where I'm at, saltwater fishing, it is fun. It is a great way to hang out with family. It is a great prepping activity that really doesn't feel like a prepping activity. Great way to bring others in your circle of friends or family sort of into the prepping world by doing something that doesn't seem weird to anybody. Nobody thinks fishing's weird, I guess, except PETA, but I really don't care about their opinion. So anyway, that's number 51, fishing supplies and tools and experience. Here's a thought too. Let's say you have some fishing supplies and tools and you personally don't know how to fish. What a great thing. Somebody in your neighborhood, on your team, your mutual assistance group, whatever it may be, probably does know how to fish and can probably make great use of that equipment. And then maybe, and this is how I see things playing out sort of barter-wise, when cash is no longer a thing and maybe electronic financial networks are disabled, or they don't work for people like you because you're a Christian, more on that in a moment, that you could give it to somebody and they could go fish and give you half the fish they catch, that kind of stuff. So even if you're not a fisherman, maybe you can make use of that equipment, or someone else can. Like to briefly mention our awesome sponsors who make this show possible. We have production costs on this show, and the only reason this show happens is because of sponsors and of Patreons. EMP Shield is a sponsor. They make a device that wires into a car or solar panel or a generator or whatever, or house, that can EMP proof whatever it's wired into. Go onto our website, prepping2-0.com, click on friends and affiliates. The EMP Shield logo will come up, and you can click on that logo, get $50 off of a device. They're between about $250 and maybe $400 for these devices. So $50, is a pretty legitimate discount. Another sponsor, New Manna Foods, NUMANNA. I always think of it as manna from heaven with NU on the beginning part of it, like new. You go there and they have freeze-dried food, sort of bulk freeze-dried food. They're not the Mountain House single-serving camping kind of freeze-dried food. And deep preps, we always believe in layering. We talk about that in our food shows, and also our forthcoming book, Food Preps 2.0, layering. Have some long-term, some short-term, medium-term, all that kind of stuff. If you go into their website, newmanna.com, and you type in prep for a discount code, you get 10% off, which is pretty cool. Another sponsor, KT Armor, CATI, which stands for Come and Take It. They make steel plates with anti-spall coating, which is great entry-level body armor. It's pretty heavy because it's steel, but it works really well, and it's very affordable. Good, solid Patriot company. You go on to CATIarmor.com, type in Grant, as in Grant Matson, my character in the books, 299 Days. You get 10% off. Ace2 Tactical, another sponsor. They make paracord everything. You kind of have to go on their website and see all the cool applications of paracord. Don't try to do paracord on your own. I mean, if you have like 3 days and nothing to do, then by all means, but nobody in this listening audience just has tons of time on their hand and nothing to do. We all have jobs and kids, and we're prepping and all that other kind of stuff. The last sponsor, Backwoods Home Magazine, great quarterly physical come in the mail publication that is all things prepping and homesteading and serves as a great reference piece. A lot of the articles in there are as relevant, 10 years from now as they are today. And Shelby and I love getting it in the mail, because we're never going to think, oh, let's go on the website and go see what's on there. Oh, there's a thing on chickens. Oh, let's print it out and put it in a file cabinet. We're not going to do that. What we do is we open up our P.O. box. There's this awesome magazine. We thumb through it and we read it and we put it on the coffee table, and they're stacked up there now from several years. We've been a subscriber for quite some time. It's a cool reference piece, and it's just a neat thing. So this is Christmas. By the time you guys hear this may or may not be Christmas. Great gifts. So consider that. If you go onto their website and use the coupon code 6OFF, which is the numeral 6 and OFF, you'll get $6 off an annual subscription. So there you go. That's the administrative stuff. And now the reason you tuned in is to hear from Mark Goodwin. Mark, say hello to everyone and tell them a little bit about yourself.
Glenn, just so happy to be here. I was really honored when you called me up and asked me to fill in. I'm sorry Greta Thunberg had to cancel, but I guess that the UN needed her to save the planet. And despite her many godlike qualities, I suppose she's not really omnipresent. And at any rate, it's a boon for me, and I'm happy to be here. Although Greta's are some pretty big shoes to fill, I'll try to do my best. So real quick about me, I'm a Christian. Yeah. I'm a prepper. Thus the Prepper Recon podcast. I like you, got into writing post-apocalyptic fiction. I think you were one of the first guests on the Prepper Recon podcast. I started that back in 2012 or 2013. I think it was 2013. And then got into writing like you, and done a few books. I write from a Christian conservative perspective. Netflix and Prime and everybody, they've got their shows out there, and all of them assume that everybody's an atheist and there is no God. Basically the same as what you would get in the public school systems. So that's where we get the Greta Thunbergs that worship Mother Earth. Is they're just indoctrinated by this system. And so I try to write something that's a little bit of a fresh approach, that it's about characters that actually believe that there is a God, and some of these people pray in the morning, and some of them read their Bibles, and some of them go to church, and they do a lot of the things that I do in my life, and I feel like I'm not represented well at all by the modern entertainment industry and most of the books out there. So I thought maybe there might be some other folks out there that were like me and would like to see real down-to-earth people that kind of live life the way they do. So there's some people that really enjoy it, and then there's others that are completely repulsed by it, and that's okay too, because I'm not here to try to please everybody. I just wanted to do something that didn't have all of the filth and the sex scenes and everything that you can get from Netflix and Prime.
You know, one of the things I like about your books, and candidly, I've listened to 3 of them, the first 3, and you've now put out 27, and I often joke around and say, oh, there's 52 reasons to blah, blah, and I kind of throw numbers around. No, this is a real live actual number, 27 books, 25 fiction, 20 and 2 nonfiction, by the way. But I was listening to the first 3 of your books many, many years ago, and I haven't listened to the other ones, not because they're no good. I have no time. People all the time, and I bet this happens to you too, Mark, people go, hey, there's this great new series. Have you read it? And you're constantly saying, I would love to. I have absolutely no time to read or even listen to other books. But anyway, so that's the reason I haven't read or listened to all of them. One of the things I like about your books is that you do portray Christians exactly as you were describing. What it isn't, because candidly, I wouldn't find this fun reading or listening. It's not like there's a scene about an EMP or something, and you say, and the Lordeth bespake in 1 Thessalonians. You show religion, and there's a religious storyline in the sense of good and evil and all of that, because that completely tracks with my and Shelby's worldview. But it's not, I don't know, preachy, for lack of a better word, because I don't find that easy for other people to follow. I find it hard for myself to follow. So when you say it's got a religious theme, I don't want to scare people off. And we've had this conversation off the air a couple of years ago. I'm from the Pacific Northwest, Seattle area. And I, for good or bad, I think bad actually, sort of grew up where you just don't talk about God. And I wish that weren't the case, and I should talk more about God. But I have this approach that to persuade people, or at least keep their attention and have credibility with them, over tons and tons of Bible quotes simply don't work. Now, the Bible is the inherently true, correct Word of God, so I'm not backing away from that. It's just sort of as persuasive stuff. So I guess I've made my point that your books have a religious theme, portray religion accurately, positively, but it's not a theology series. How do you feel about that characterization of it?
Yeah, that's accurate. It's just that my people are going through EMPs and economic collapses and government takeovers and civil wars and all of that kind of thing. They just happen to sort of live life the way I do, and they assume that the universe was created, and they pray to that creator, and they read the book that he gave them, and that's all. And they're not running around preaching sermons on every other chapter. It's just that it informs the way that they live their lives in the same way that it informs the way that I live my life. Because, like I said, anything you see on Prime or Netflix, these people are all, their worldview is that everything happened by itself, and we're here. We have no purpose, and when this is over, that's it. We dissolve into the ether, and so there's a lot of other people that don't believe that, but they're not at all represented in media. We talk a lot, especially if you've heard any programs from the left, they talk a lot about diversity and everybody needs to get represented. And it feels like everybody's fairly well represented. The 50% of Americans that are gay, we certainly see all of them in all of the media. Half of every, I don't know how we've managed to reproduce at such a successful rate with half of America being gay. If you believe the mainstream media and all the shows that are on Netflix and all the other outlets out there. So they're well represented, but Christians, if you ever do see a Christian in a Netflix film, there's some psycho that's trying to start a cult, and that's not all of us. And there are a few of those. There's some folks that need a little bit more grace, even in the church and in the Christian community. But that's not all of us.
Yeah, exactly. And I would add to the what you're talking about Christianity, the feminism issue, and I know that's a variant of atheism, and we're talking about political feminism. We're not talking about women being equal, because the greatest supporter of equality among genders and races would be, the New Testament in particular. And so that's not what we're talking about, the political feminism. And I always hate this. I don't know if this applies to you too. And this is slightly off topic because we were talking about Christianity and all of that, but the popular culture and Netflix and the TV shows and even ads on TV, the men are always stupid, right? It's always and you probably haven't watched TV in so many years, but you may remember this from the past, right? The man is always dumb. He is about to buy the wrong product, and the wife or the kids, often the kids, are so much more enlightened, and men are stupid and dopey, and all they do is sit on the couch and watch TV and that kind of stuff. Anyway, I hate that stuff too. So that's another reason that popular culture is garbage. I don't know. What do you think about the feminism stuff?
Yeah, and there are some real Homer Simpsons out there because I've met them. But like you said, that's not everybody. And from mainstream media and mainstream entertainment, that's what you would think, that we're all dope, drunk on the couch, and falling asleep at the causing a nuclear meltdown.
Well, speaking of nuclear meltdowns, can you just name the various series you have and sort of the main, crisis in them? You mentioned EMP books and economic collapse books and stuff like that. Can you go through them chronologically and say the first series was this and it was a Civil War setting and that kind of stuff? Just whet people's appetites for some of the settings of the books that you've written.
Sure. My most recent series is Black Swan. That's a guy. He's a guitar player for the biggest country music band on the scene right now, and he's sort of been blinded by all the glitter and the gold, and he's got himself a trophy wife, and she's a little tarnished, and he's got some regrets, and they're playing the New Year's Eve show in Times Square when everything starts unraveling, and he's got to get out of Manhattan with no gun and find his way back home. And through that, he's also on this sort of spiritual journey of finding his way back to his roots as well. And that's an economic collapse series. And Black Swan's the name of that series once again. And then before that, I think was my Avis Crucible, and that was a Civil War in America, which is something very fictional and probably not very realistic in most people's minds. But it's a fun read.
Oh, we'll be talking about that here.
It's a fun read.
Yes.
The left basically hijacked the election by just sending some Antifa thugs to a very few polling stations in key states and key counties, and what do you know? They sway the election just enough by intimidating conservatives not to show up at the polls, and they take the election, and then the Patriots have to, fight back very hard to get that back, because I think that's their MO is for the left is playing dirty, and I think we keep saying more and more of that. I did an EMP series which was called Seven Cows, Ugly and Gaunt, and then I did, if you've ever read the Left Behind series, I did sort of a prequel prior to the Rapture, which was called The Days of Noah, and then picked that up where the Days of Noah left off at the Rapture, and did a series called The Days of Elijah. And so those are real fun reads as well.
Exactly. And speaking of your books, and speaking of civil wars, I remember, and if I get the facts wrong, please correct me. It's been a number of years since I listened to your, I want to say, first series that you did. It involves Virginia, and your characters are operating off the top of my head in Kentucky or Tennessee, a state bordering Virginia. And I remember a reference to flows of troops and refugees from Virginia. Can you expand on that and apply it to what we're seeing in Virginia now? Because I remember that scene. Not all the details, but I remember the Virginia aspect. And when you wrote it 5 years ago, I thought, well, that's crazy. I mean, Virginia, that's so conservative, so many patriots. They're not going to have ever any gun rights problems. Go ahead and teleport us back maybe to that setting and, not the details of it, but what you wrote about and how it relates to Virginia. And to be clear, it was sort of a side reference. It wasn't a book about how Virginia is going to have gun control and 5 years later everything's come true. I'm not exaggerating.
Oh yeah, you get states like that are maybe more or less conservative, but because the population centers are very much controlled by the left, they're the ones that end up writing all the laws and dictating how those states are going to move forward in the future. And I can't remember exactly what was going on in that book because I guess there's been a lot of water under the bridge since I wrote that. But yeah, I've always kind of got that in most of the books where you really see the infection spreading like a cancer from those population centers out into the places that have traditionally been more conservative. I think we're seeing a lot of that in Florida right now because after the new tax law, a lot of folks started moving to more tax-friendly states, and unfortunately, and they leave behind all their leftist politics. They don't leave behind all their leftist politics. They bring them with them into the more conservative places. So, I think we're seeing Florida go from a less purple state to a much bluer state. We've certainly seen that with Texas, with everybody leaving California and going to Texas. And it's going to be very, very difficult for Republicans to ever win another presidential election without Florida and Texas. So it's a really dangerous situation that we're in politically, and the things that are happening that are sort of the undertow of politics and the things that maybe aren't getting as much press as the impeachment and things.
Yeah, exactly. We have a minute to go before we go into the next segment, and I'll just spend this minute putting an exclamation mark on, or exclamation point on everything you said. I have, by the way, a radio show, 2-hour weekly radio show on KHNC 1360 AM in Colorado, and you can find those shows. But I've talked a lot about the bluification, the purpling of Texas and other states, and you just do the arithmetic with electoral votes. And let's put it in perspective. Obama lost in Texas by, off the top of my head, 12 points in 2012. Hillary lost off the top of my head by 6 points 4 years later. Beto O'Rourke lost the Senate race, and he was an absolute train wreck of a candidate, by 2 points. You can see the trend. Well, we have just a couple seconds to get out of segment 1 and go into segment 2, which we will do. Stick around. We have only scratched the surface with Mark Goodwin. If you like this kind of stuff and you like trying to figure out what's going to happen, you're going to like listening to Mark Goodwin, because I like listening to him because he has a good track record with me. Stick around for Mark Goodwin, folks.
We'll be right back with more of Prepping 2.0 with authors Shelby Gallagher and Glenn Tate right after this.
Shelby Gallagher here. We found that you need to layer your food preps.
Yeah, this is Glenn Tate here. A lot of times the hardest part of layering is the long-term foods. We love NuManna foods, which have a 25-year shelf life and are non-GMO. Also, organic meals are available.
NuManna comes in family-style portions and in bulk. This is not backpacking food. It's family meals that last for at least 25 years. The perfect freeze-dried part of your food layering.
You can get a sample of NuManna meals for $19.95 and see for yourself. You will be amazed.
Prepping 2.0 listeners get a 10% discount by entering the code PREP.
Go to NuManna.com or click the link on the Prepping 2.0 website.
Give it a try. NuManna.com. That is NuManna.com.
When the grid goes down, darkness will descend fast. Used to be there was nothing you could do about an EMP, electromagnetic pulse, or CME, coronal mass ejection. Now you can protect your electronics, protect your family, thanks to EMP Shield. EMP Shield invented a simple-to-install device that prevents whatever's connected to it from frying in an EMP or CME, and it costs just a few $100s. EMP Shield has been tested by independent laboratories and passed muster with the government, which has ordered lots of them. Google EMP Shield and see for yourself. And save some money. Get a $50 discount per device. Go to prepping2-0.com. Click on the Friends and Affiliates page, then click on the EMP Shield logo. At checkout, use coupon code PREPPING2.0. It's all one word.
Prepping 2.0 is about that next level of prepping. One of the key 2.0 items to have is bulletproof body armor plates. I used to think body armor was too tactical for a regular guy like me, but it isn't. Give yourself, your family, and your team an unfair advantage when bullets are flying. Body armor used to be expensive and hard to get. Not anymore. KD Armor, and that stands for Come and Take It, makes solid and affordable body armor for normal people. Get body armor while you can. The clowns in Congress are trying to prohibit future sales. KD Armor is the place to get it. CATI armor.com. Prepping 2.0 listeners get a 10% discount when you use the coupon code GRANT.
PrepperNet, where preppers unite. Looking to meet other like-minded people in your area? Looking to start your own prepper group? Already have a group? Join PrepperNet.com. PrepperNet has gathered the biggest names in the industry to help unite preppers everywhere. Join John Jacob Schmidt, Scott Hunt, Dr. Bones and Nurse Amy, Glenn Tate, Shelby Gallagher, Charlie Hogwood, Samuel Culper, Survivor Jane, Rick Austin, Franklin Horton, Ryan Mitchell, and Brian Duff. Our team is united. Check us out at PrepperNet.com. PrepperNet, where preppers unite. PrepperNet.com.
And we're back with more of Prepping 2.0 with authors Glenn Tate and Shelby Gallagher.
We're back, everybody. Segment 2 with prepper author Mark Goodwin. Mark, you mentioned at the very beginning of segment 1, you said that I was on the show early on, and you had me on several times, which was a hoot. I remember we were talking about several years ago, buying ammunition and how ammunition is a precious metal. And you coined a phrase, and that's a semi-pun, coined a phrase. You called ammunition that glentadium. That was the precious metal. It was glentadium. And I've since used that a bit. And in my conversations with Joe Jaquint at the Patriot Trading Group, who sells gold and silver, we've done a lot of fun stuff that you'll be seeing more about later with the whole glentadium idea. So high five on a cool little phrase that you coined. Well, we were just talking about bluification and some of the political problems with demographics, and both political demographics and other demographics. It's crystal clear that Virginia has had a big influx of legal and illegal immigrants into the northern Virginia counties, the D.C. suburbs, and then probably more perniciously, you've had an inflow of D.C.-based people who work for the federal government who now live in Northern Virginia. And both those groups, legal and illegal immigrants and federal workers, are way more likely to vote for Democrats. It's a fact. It's not anything weird. It's just a fact. Legal and illegal immigrants vote 70% or more for Democrats. It's a fact. So then you've got Virginia flipping, and look at all the stuff. If I may ask you to don the crystal ball, what do you think's going to happen in Virginia? Because I think everybody, especially now that, late 2019, early 2020, when people are listening to this, all eyes are on Virginia. What do you think's going to happen, and why do you think it's happening?
Yeah, I dropped my crystal ball right before the show started. It's got a big crack down the side of it. The only thing I was getting for 2020 predictions was the Orioles are going to beat the Tigers in the World Series, which that might not be very good, and something about Elon Musk topping out Zuckerberg, Gates, and Bezos from after he invents a new organic diet soda that tastes like rainbows and makes you feel 20 years younger. So crystal ball is I got to get that thing back in the shop. I think there's a few predictions that we can make with some accuracy, though. Virginia, just going left, and I think that's part of a plan. I think that somehow, some way, and sometimes things are part of a plan, and then sometimes you think, man, these leftists, I don't think they could plan a picnic. How are they pulling this stuff off? And I think there's a spiritual agenda with it, and I think that there's spiritual guidance. The same way that a Christian can pray, seek guidance from the Holy Spirit, I think that these folks are getting some guidance from an unholy spirit because they're just not that smart, Glenn. But a quick prediction that I think we can make back to the Glenn Tadium. We don't have anybody that's friendly to the Second Amendment that's running the Democratic primaries. I think Bloomberg's probably the most professed anti-gun person that's vying for that seat. But any of them, I think, are going to probably push up you're going to see shortages in guns and ammo as we get closer to the election. A lot of conservatives have been thinking that happy days are here again and haven't bought a gun or a box of ammo since Trump was elected. And so the clock might be running out on that. I think we're going to see a lot of folks rushing out and trying to make some last-minute purchases just in case. And as we've seen after Sandy Hook and other incidents like that, the market's not that well supplied. When everybody decides to go buy it all at once, it starts looking like a grocery store in Florida 24 hours before a Category 5 makes landfall. And the shelves are stripped and there's just nothing left. So right now might be a really good time for folks that are thinking of making that type of an investment. Strike while the iron's hot, and make hay while the sun's shining.
Boy, and you can imagine, I'm going to say, heck yeah, not only on the obvious prepping message, which is be prepared. That's obvious. And I don't know if I've ever mentioned the name of the show, Prepping 2.0, where that comes from. We've all been Prepper 1.0s, that first level, which was, having some beans and an AR-15, and all that's good, and you got to start somewhere, and that's awesome. Prepping 2.0 is focusing more on the mid and long term, and that would be community, communications, night vision, water, all that other stuff. But back to the Prepping 1.0 versus 2.0. Yes, you're right. A lot of preppers, and more conservatives probably than hardcore preppers, just basically, decided to take the rest of eternity off and not, spend time and money on prepping, or maybe social disgrace, right? That's a cost of prepping depending on what situation you're in. And you're right, they don't say after Trump got elected, they always say after Hillary didn't get elected, right? I decided to take it easy. And that is a wrong approach for all the obvious reasons. But here's a very specific thing people should consider. AR-15s in particular have never been cheaper. Ammunition is at, as a practical matter, historic lows. I know you're going to say, when I was a kid, I could buy a box of 22 shells at the hardware store for 99 cents. So that's why I say, as a practical matter, ammunition is at the lowest price it's been, because those good old days are never coming back. This is the time. Make hay while the sun shines, exactly like you said. I used to write a lot about AK-74s and how cheap ammunition was and how cheap AK-74s are, and get a bunch. By the way, Mark, I'm doing a second edition of 299 Days. I'm going to modernize it, and that's going to come out right after the 2020 election. And one of the changes in the book will be scrapping the references to AK-74s. They're fine firearms, but they're not what they used to be as far as cheap ammunition. My point, and I'm going to replace it with a storyline about bargain AR-15s that work perfectly well, especially for the uses most folks are going to have for them. I mean, you're probably not going to be doing 5,000 rounds a week because you're an operator. I know I'm not, right? And so now is the time. I talk about it. The golden age of AR-15s is now. The golden age of ammunition prices is right now. And 2020, you're exactly right, Mark. There's going to be a big ramp up. I think there's going to be some spiciness in Virginia in January 2020 and thereafter. And there's that terrible feeling, guys, and you know exactly what I'm talking about when I say this. you go and you say, geez, I need to get some ammunition. And you go and you look at a case of 5.56 that used to be affordable. And then all of a sudden it's 15, 20% more. And the next day it's 5% more. And you just say, oh, I should have got that earlier. Don't be that guy. This is the golden age. Get that stuff now, because you're right. 2020 is going to be interesting. And especially if we have, on the federal front, we have a Democrat winning, or even like looking like he or she might win. And given that the left controls all the polling, a lot of people are going to think the left's going to win, much like the Hillary thing, and then they don't. So now is the time. Well, tell us about your podcast also, because that's what got me hooked on you, was listening to your podcast, and you've always had great guests and all of that. So tell us about the podcast.
Yeah, I did a weekly show for I guess about 5 years, from 2013 till last year, and last year we relocated to the Appalachian Mountains. And when I got there, I didn't really have the type of internet connection that I used to have. So and plus I had tons and tons of projects, because this is a beautiful property that had been neglected for years and just needed a lot of work done to it. So I, with the writing and we just I've got a 2.5-year-old little girl that has a lot of daddy's time. And the property, something had to give. I had to step back because it was, and I'm not going to give up my sleep. So I had to step back from the podcast a little bit. I've been still trying to get one show a month out. And some of those are monologues because I don't have the connection. I'm in Florida right now for a couple of weeks, so I'm trying to get a few recorded and try to keep some good shows coming out, at least one a month going forward in 2020.
I would encourage folks to subscribe to Prepper Recon on whatever system. I use iTunes, but I'm sure you're on Stitcher and all that other stuff. Subscribe to it. Go back and listen to the episodes from a few years ago and tell me if Mark hasn't been nailing it and his guests haven't been nailing it for quite some time. So, yeah, go ahead and do that. So there's the podcast. Well, you were very clear about the crystal ball, and I appreciate that. I get that question too, crystal ball stuff, and I don't make, detailed predictions because I'm a human being. I'm not God, and I'm not nearly as smart as God, and it's his world, not mine. So he knows what's happening. I don't, but I do talk about trends. And
I think there's a couple of easy ones though that we've got for 2020.
Go for it.
I think that we can say with some level of confidence that the Fed's going to continue to pump money into the markets. Since September, they're approaching $500 billion of what they've put into the repo market, and I think before it all said and done, that we will have pumped another $500 billion into the repo markets. And now this isn't
if I can interrupt you for just a moment, the repo markets, when you say that, I know what you're talking about. Joe Jaquin on Patriot Radio News Hour covers it too. We don't mean like cars that have missing payments. When you say repo, a lot of people think that. And we had a guest on a couple weeks ago, Daniel from Humana, who did a magnificent job of explaining the repo markets. But in case people haven't heard about it, in a nutshell, what is the repo market, and how is that a way that the Federal Reserve is pumping all kinds of money into the economy?
And those are repurchase. It's repo short. It's not repossession. It's short for repurchase, and it's banks borrowing money from other banks on very short term basis. Sometimes as few as 2 or 3 days. And this is the sort of the grease and the gears behind all of the other markets, the equity markets and mortgages and car loans and credit cards and everything else. This is what's keeping the grease going in the gears. And of course, a lot of machines, you take the grease out of the gears, everything will just freeze up. So I think that's probably the easiest way to say it without getting into the weeds.
Exactly. Banks don't have a ton of cash lying around because they've purchased so much debt, largely treasury notes, and their loans aren't performing, and the banks can't basically pay their bills, and so they need to borrow money, and they're not healthy and steaming along like you would think. You'd think banks have all this money. Well, they kind of do, because they get functionally free money from the Federal Reserve, but it's still a problem. And you mentioned things freezing up, like a crunch, like a credit crunch. And if a bank, and these are major banks, not your hometown banks, but if a large bank cannot, I don't know, cover all of the, they're not really withdrawals, but electronic payments and debt payments and all that other stuff, then stuff goes crazy. You've got an AIG situation, a Lehman Brothers, where a big financial institution can't pay its bills. Even for 5 seconds, that's a problem, because everybody will freak out. And this is such a debt-laden, burdened economy that all of a sudden, if people aren't paying their stuff, they aren't using debt to pay interest, then everything comes crashing down. And you're absolutely right. And I remember in the early 2000 teens, whatever we're going to end up calling this decade, that's going to end in a couple days, by the way, like on the calendar, guys, not like the world's coming to an end, because it's 2019 now, December. I think that there was all kinds of talk, and people kind of knew about QE1 and all that other stuff. But this repo thing is going on without any fanfare. Even patriots largely don't know what's going on. And that tells me that there's a big problem, that it's for whatever reason, nobody's talking about it. What do you think about the lack of attention that the repo markets are getting, even among lack of attention among preppers?
Yeah, I think that's the official name for it too, isn't it? It's not QE. Is that what they're calling it? I mean,
yeah, exactly.
But
yeah.
Anyway, this isn't the Dow's not in free fall. You know, we're not at 25% unemployment, Glenn. You know, on the contrary, you know, we've got short-term record lows in unemployment, and equities are hitting all-time highs. But it sounds like somebody's worried about something. And it sounds like there's definitely some problems. And, you know, can they fix it? Can they keep pumping money in it? And can they keep the wheels greased? Maybe and maybe not. But either way, they're devaluing the currency that's in your bank account and that's in your wallet. And you talked about being able to buy a box of ammo for 99 cents, 22 shells or whatever. You're not going to be able to buy anything for 99 cents. 99 cents is going to be like a penny. You know, a lot of people, they see a penny in the parking lot, they don't bother to bend over and pick it up, because it's just not worth the wear and tear that's going to put on the inside of your pocket. And the dollar bill's getting like that, you know. I'm not going to pick up that dollar. I just don't want it. It's not worth stretching out my wallet to put a dollar bill in there. And that's where we're getting. And, you know, this happens slowly at first and then very rapidly. And, you know, so many empires and states have been through this experiment where they just debase and abuse the currency until the point where nobody really wants it anymore. And it's, you know, the $100 bills like the penny. And so on and so on, to where, and then at some point the rest of the world's going to get tired of this, of having the U.S. dollar as the world reserve currency and sitting back and watching us just abuse it and print it. And we're going to have to keep doing it, because there's no other way out. We have passed we've crossed the Rubicon. There's no turning back right now. The federal government, that's another prediction I think we can safely make for 2020. They're going to borrow another $1 trillion. They're going to add that to the $23 trillion that we already have. Scratch that on up to 24. Now, this borrowing is on top of, this isn't part of the printing. This is on top of the printing. So we're devaluing, we're literally burning the candle at both ends with devaluation through printing and through the borrowing. So I can't say if 2020 is the tipping point. You know, I thought 2012, 2013, 2014, you know, I can't believe that we're still here. It's just getting comical at this point. But someday the bill's going to come due.
Yeah, exactly. And I 100% agree with everything about there being more money in the system, which then catastrophically and quickly leads to inflation, and the effects of inflation are being masked. You mentioned the stock market at all-time highs, and I gave up. I think we even talked about this on one of the shows we did a while ago, where I said, listen, the Federal Reserve people, or whoever they are, they're so much smarter than me because they figured out a way to keep this economy going along and the stock market up when it shouldn't be. So they've got tools and tricks that I haven't even conceived of. It's quantum mathematics or some crazy thing. And so I don't know what's going on. Well, you mentioned dollars not being worth anything from the inflationary aspect. Another thing that I think preppers need to worry about, and specifically Christian preppers, would be a purposeful denial of access to money based on your beliefs. And here's how I see this happening. China has the social credit score, where based on a variety of things like Facebook posts and other stuff, if you're a good person in the Communist Party's mind, you get a higher score and you can buy stuff, transactions move better. If you are a bad person in the Communist Party's mind, like, you support independence for Hong Kong or something like that, then you get a low score, and you can't, with all the computer transactions, those transactions compare, the transaction to your score. For example, if you're a bad person in China because you believe in liberty, you cannot get a train ticket because the computer, for some things like train tickets, maybe not everything, the computer knows that for big things like that, based on your social credit score, you will be declined. And I don't know how it ends up looking for patriots and or Christians. There's a lot of overlap, but not 100% overlap between those two bodies of people. I could see with all the Facebook, Zuckerberg, Google stuff, I could see social credit scores in the United States. We know, and then, guys like you and me, when we go to buy ammunition, our cards are declined, for example, and that could be the start of it, and it could get worse. What do you think about the selective denial of access to money, especially based on political or religious views? Because I can see that as affecting people like us just as much as it taking $10,000 to buy a cup of coffee because of inflation.
Sure. Yeah, I use the social credit score in my Avis Crucible series, the Civil War series, where the far left states they actually impose that. And in that series, I try to portray it. I just basically cut and paste Chinese policies onto America because, that's what they're trying to do. Bernie Sanders just wants to cut and paste. So all of the economic stuff that they're trying to convince everybody that we're going to get economic equality, that's how you get it, by getting rid of God and by making the state your absolute authority. And another thing that happens in China to Christians is that you're very often you can become an involuntary organ donor. You're a healthy Christian, and there's somebody else that's high up in the party, and they need a lung, and you've got one. Guess what? They just come take it. And they'll sell them on the black market. They'll give them to people that have higher social credit scores because they need that lung, and because you're so low in the score, you really don't. So that's certainly something that we could see in America, and that's certainly the direction that we've been going for decades now, Glenn.
Yeah, and it's another reason, the possibility of this, and by the way, I'm not saying it's going to happen next Tuesday or anything, but the possibility of this is another reason to have stuff. So, for example, with the ammunition, you don't need to buy ammunition because you already have it. And number two, have food and all of that those preps. And also, guys, when it comes to financial stuff, gold and silver, that is a great way to get around this, because I foresee Christian or patriot communities bartering with each other and just kind of dropping off out of to the extent possible, the regular people financial system, the good little socialist people's financial system. Well, we have about 2-3 minutes till the end of the regular show, and then of course we'll pick up the conversation as we always do in the after show, which is for Patreon supporters. Prepping2-0.com is to tell you all about the Patreon things. $2 a month, and you get access to the after show. I'm going to start a topic and tease it, and I don't try to do this. It always works out this way, where we have a great conversation that gets rolling, and then we're at the end of the regular show, and it goes into the after show. So here's the topic to get started that we'll finish up in the after show, along with, by the way, Patreon questions. I put it up on Patreon, and we get some really good questions for Mark. We try to have questions for each guest that he answers, and he doesn't see them in advance, so they're really like off the cuff, like, ad hoc answers. And what do you think, Mark? And you've written about this, the deep state. What's going on with the deep state? Let's start that conversation off.
Well, I certainly think that, and the thing about the deep state is it's like looking at an iceberg. You see the little tip of ice up above it, but you don't really see everything that's underneath. And I think that that's sort of what the idea is behind the deep state. But Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I think she's probably a good example of it. I doubt that it was really just this grassroots type of thing that found somebody that was probably very, very good at mixing a martini and is now in this elevated status of being in the American Congress. I suspect that there's some folks behind that, especially when I see her Green New Deal looking very, very similar to Agenda 2030.
And Mark, I hate to do this. This always happens. I have to interrupt guests mid-sentence and say, geez, we're going to have to carry this over to the after show, but we are.
We'll talk about it there.
Thank you so much for listening. Episode 61 with Mark Goodwin. Keep listening to Prepping 2.0, regular show or after show. We love talking to both of you audiences. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Prepping 2.0 with authors Shelby Gallagher and Glenn Tate. All of the fun and easy prepping information heard on this podcast can be found online at prepping2-0.com. You can also find out more about Glenn's books online at 299days.com and about Shelby's books online at agreatstate.com. Until next time, be smart, be safe, and be prepared.